Welcome to StL in the Huddle, the official podcast of the National Football Foundation, Tom Lombardo's St. Louis chapter. Hosted by Ken Leach, Tom Swoboda, and me, Sherry Farmer-Hebert. Broadcasting from the Bon and Tower studio in Town and Country, Missouri. Today's episode is brought to you by People's National Bank. Customers, people, community. Member FDIC.
Hey, welcome to StL in the Huddle, the official podcast of the St. Louis Tom Lombardo chapter of the National Football Foundation, College Football Hall of Fame. We've got a great guest with us tonight. We've got retired NFL official Joe Larrew. Joe, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me and for being on your debut here.
This is big for us because this is the first time in our studio.
Yes.
So you're our guinea pig.
Well, I'm used to that too. Okay, go ahead. Whatever you want.
Yeah, we've never all been together with a camera.
Right.
They don't allow that, really.
It's not a good combination. So
This is the first time you've ever been in the huddle, actually in the huddle.
Not on purpose. Yeah. I've been surrounded by a huddle and times when I wasn't looking for to have that happen, but yeah, it is.
So, Joe, let me ask you this. You've been a lawyer, you're a judge. How do you get into the NFL? How does that all happen with your
There's no
profession?
plan.
Okay.
There's no plan. And everybody's kind of surprised when I don't go in a direction like, well, you played this, so you must have been, whatever. No. What happened was, in 1977, I graduated law school. And my wife, we got married 1 week after law school, and I think about 30 minutes after that, we found out we were going to have a baby. But it was longer than that. It just seemed like that, okay? So bottom line, and I still had to pass the bar exam that July and looking for a job. And about that point, I found a job at St. Louis County Public Defender's Office paying me the astronomical figure of $15,500. With the baby on the way, very little income and so forth. So I ran into my, from time to time, my head football coach, basketball coach, and, kept up with some things. And they would say, you ought to get involved and officiated. And, then explain that, I can go work a game and I might make $5, $10, $15. And so I said, yeah, that sounds like a good way to do it in my, off time and whatever. So I did start doing basketball, then I did football. That was 1977. By 1978, I was doing both. And, I picked up games anywhere and everywhere that I could find them. I mean, I might work 4 or 5, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade football games. I might work 2 or 3 basketball games a night. And it was, some pretty good extra money. So, then I kept doing it. And basically what happens as time goes on, you get interested in working at a higher level. And then I got the opportunity to work some of the bigger high school games. And I got the real big high school games. And then I was given an opportunity if I wanted to try to go work at some college football. So I thought I'd do that too. And again, keep in mind, you're getting paid a little bit for all this, not a lot of money, but it was some extra income back when I needed it. And then I swear, at one point I'm working, a small college, WashU, and true story, if you want one about, you remember, Carl Mattson?
That's your
Yeah, he and I, we broke into the NFL together, but we were on high school crews forever. I'll tell you the story. Our first college game was Washington University, okay? And we're playing at WashU, and we got a 5-man crew as opposed to 6 or 7. And during that ball game, as a result of flags that Carl and I threw, we called back 3 touchdowns against Washington University. And after that, the coach pretty much let us know we wouldn't be working their games because they didn't hire officials to throw flags on them. So we got fired from our first college game and thought we would never be doing anything else. And fortunately, we kept going. And like I said, we were working pretty good high school games. But then we got to the point where we might work 3 football games on the weekend, where like a Friday night, high school, and then we might work, WashU on a Saturday, or we might be going to Southern Illinois or whatever. And that was the track we were on for quite a while. And then we're fortunate enough at some point in time, they scout, all these levels scout. Mm-hmm. And about early 1990, about 1993, Carl had gone into the Gateway Conference, which is now the Missouri Valley, I think. it was a really good conference, high level, 2A, national championship type thing. And Carl was in the crew, so I got on the crew that year, and then, within a couple of years, we did the national championship game between Youngstown, Randy Moss was on the team, and they were playing
Marshall.
Washington.
Marshall, yeah.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Yeah, and the NFL guys were there scouting us. Apparently, every game we found out after that they were there. And at some point in time, they told, Carl had put in an application. They told me to put an application in. Then Carl got hired a couple of years after that, and I got hired to work in the league in 2002 after we both had been to NFL Europe, which is like their training league, which is what they should have now for everybody, not just officials, but players and coaches. It was a great place to learn and make your mistakes, without anybody watching you, and working the NFL rules and pretty much NFL quality players and coaches. They talk about Kurt Warner having been there. A lot of the NFL coaches that coached over there became head coaches, in the league. So that was a great training opportunity. And then, fortunately, I got hired in 2002 to work in the league. Did I leave anything out? No, sorry.
You make it sound so it just happened. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, I'm sure, in there. And
there was ups and downs. Yeah. I mean, there really were. And there's points, and I can remember vividly, there were, after doing all that, I thought in 2002, and, the NFL announced their hirings, and I wasn't among them. And I thought, well, I'm through. Okay, this is it. So I'll go back, do college, be happy. And then, but 3 weeks later, got a call, and you're in. And needless to say, I never looked back. So it was great.
That's a lot of time away from your family, too, when you're working those games.
Nobody pays a bigger price than our families. And
so when you first got in, though, the demand's high, so it's probably easy to get in, and you got to pass some tests, of course. But how hard is it to progress from, let's say, junior to high school to college?
Well, you're talking about then or now?
Well, give us both.
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Back then, there weren't that many high schools. So you had a great opportunity to work, but you're talking freshman, sophomore games. I mean, right. The older officials kind of had a lock on the good games and whatever, and we were only 4-man crews back then. So basically you had to go work the freshman, sophomore games and then hope somebody got hurt, and then you got on a crew or something like that. And it was very important. It's a very valuable part of the experience. Nowadays, and as Tom knows, I came back for a year after I got out of the NFL to try to promote officiating at the high school level because there is a desperate need. Mm-hmm. They how many high schools do you have now? We had 20, 25 back then. What do you got now? 80, 90? So you got the kids playing on Thursday nights, Friday nights. They can't find enough officials. And in my opinion, they especially can't find enough officials who've had the good experiences that you need to become a better official. Mm-hmm. And, I used to get these opportunities. I remember going over to CBC one time to talk about, I just had the Super Bowl or something like that, about that. And I said, I'll trade that off. I'll be happy to come and do it if I could have 5 minutes talking to the guys over there about the fact that if you've enjoyed your experience in high school, then you ought to appreciate the fact that you would want your sons and everybody else to do it. And the only way it's going to happen if we start getting, and I'm talking men and women now, it's not just men now, out there on the football field, so programs can continue to play games on Friday night and Saturday afternoon as opposed to having to book them on a Thursday afternoon and things like that. So what I'm saying right now, there's a real desperate need for more, and I can tell you, for what it's worth, the pay is a lot better. I mean, back when I was working, if I got $10, that was enough. And I just want to say this, I think the high school guys are getting over $100 a game right now. So, and you're not going to get that right away, but, that's not a bad way to spend 3 hours. Besides that, I love the game and the officiating opportunity. But, you can make a few bucks in there and help out.
And you're also getting some exercise, running up and down that field.
Oh, you get a lot of that. Yeah.
And a camaraderie. Actually, you get a crew. You get to know these guys. They're like your friends you get together, right?
No question about it. I mean, the crew concept is as important on the field as it is off the field, okay? And they become your best friends. You work together for a few years. And Carl and I had moved on, but those guys remained great friends. But then, that was the best thing about Europe. You got over there, and all these guys that you worked with over there all got in the NFL. So sooner or later, you're working on a crew with those guys. You had all your stories about, Europe, you could tell, and I won't go into that because some of them shouldn't be told. But that's how that experience went too.
Awesome.
Well, let me ask you this. We had Sherry's husband on. He's an official here in St. Louis, and he talked about his prep. What does your prep look like in the NFL game week? What is it like? It's going to start on Sunday after the game, okay? Because they're going to hand you a tape of the game right there, and the expectation is you're going to watch that, while you're flying back to St. Louis or whatever. But in addition, every great game is being graded. So after I get done with their game in the locker room, and remember, we had to catch a plane, so we didn't have much time. I'd have to write out a evaluation sheet and put on it all the fouls I called and an explanation of why I called them and so forth. And that would be sent to New York. Now, keep in mind, all this evolved from the handwriting to the computers to putting all that stuff in on Monday morning as terms of what they have now. But there was a lot of reporting. I was never that big on trying to watch the game that night. I mean, I've been going for 3 days now while I've been there, and I wanted to retire, take a nap, maybe have a cocktail. I mean, I'm just saying, you're let down, Sure.
and I'd be landing at Lambert at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night because I always had to connect out of the East Coast. And, my poor wife, would come pick me up and things like that. But then, Monday morning I was expected to do my reports and, and look at the games and whatever. And then the waiting process in terms of the league grading everything. But, you might get Tuesday off, except by then they'd looked at the plays and they would send back the one to say, okay, we have a problem with this. So now you're supposed to respond in terms of why you didn't call this or why you did call this and whatever. So you had that process. And then on Wednesday, they had what they call collaboration, where all the graders would get together and go over all that, decide who was going to get a positive grade, who was going to get a negative grade. During the week, we had rules test. They would do training tapes for us to watch.
Every week?
Every week. Yeah, and all that you needed to do before you got to the game sites, whatever. And not only would you have training tapes from the game, you had training tapes from your supervisors, the downfield supervisors, the line of scrimmage supervisors, and whatever, and so forth. And then there would be a test you're supposed to fill out or work on until you get there on Saturday. Then Saturday is just a long day. I mean, first off, you're flying where you're going to go. Then you've got a 3-hour pregame, where you're meeting, talking about everything under the sun and the films of the teams you're working that day and so forth. And then Saturday night, we'd all go out to dinner. And then, Sunday morning, we either go to mass or to church or whatever real quickly, or have a prayer session. And then we go right into leaving there because we had to be at the game site 3 hours before. And then when you get there, you got things you have to do in the locker room and on the field, and then interact with the coaches, before the game and give them information and get information. And then 3 hours later, you're walking off the field and, depending on the conditions, muddy day, wet day, cold day, freezing rain day, whatever, then, you get undressed and you're talking in the locker room. And again, you start the process over again of trying to get your reports ready so you can all get on to me, I was more concerned about catching that bus and getting to as opposed to getting stuck in, Buffalo on a Sunday night.
I knew you were going to say Buffalo.
Oh, yeah. Well, Buffalo, this is still true. Now, they're getting a brand new stadium, which is going to be great.
Yeah.
But theirs was an old stadium, and it was nowhere near civilization. It was out there in the country, whereas you might find, in Kansas City, I mean, they may be a drive from the airport, but at least they were where there were roads and highways. And in Buffalo, they would not give us a police escort. Almost everywhere we had one. So we just give the extra money to the bus guide, say, we don't care if you get it, whatever. We'll take care of you, but get us to the airport on time so we can catch our planes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about safety, because oftentimes officials, and I know you don't do it on purpose, where viewers may be like, oh, what kind of call did he make? He's out of his mind, this and that. How do you feel when you leave the game? Do they help you safety-wise? You have police escorts, they hide you.
It's a big deal. I cannot give enough thanks and recognition to the NFL security. It's beyond anything you can imagine. And that includes the off season when they do the background checks on us, and we do the interviews and what they go through. But at the stadium, we were talking about this the other day, that once you get there, you're under their umbrella, and nobody can get near you. I mean, in terms of on the field, you're protected. Locker rooms, nobody's in the locker rooms. They always come to pick us up to take us to the stadium. So you had that. And I'm laughing. I remember when I did the Super Bowl, we were in New Orleans, and I'm telling you, our stadium was maybe 2 blocks. And they come loaded up, and they got the guys with the guns, with the big rifles and all that. Okay, we're going to get on. We're going to stadium, and I'm thinking, why don't we just walk over there? It'd be a lot easier to get there as opposed to doing what we did. But again, when a town is having a Super Bowl, it's just unbelievable.
Imagine a lot of chaos.
How many Super Bowls did you do?
I did one. I did one.
And were you with Dick Hantak when he did his, or was that a separate time?
No, Rich is a little older than me.
Okay, yeah.
Great friend and a mentor, and he is so admired in the league. He had two Super Bowls, I know, maybe 3. When I came in, he had 1 or 2 more years before he retired. He had Mattson as his umpire, but I would say Rich was one of the most respected referees in the league. And they always tell the story, and I love it, about when he worked his last game, he was in Green Bay. And at the end of the game, they announced it or whatever, and who's the great Green Bay quarterback?
Favre.
Brett Favre comes over and hugs him and says thank you, and the coaches. And you don't oftentimes get recognition like that from the players.
I remember that.
He was my counselor in high school, believe it or not, Rich Hantak.
I talked to him a lot. I talked to him today. We're talking about our NFL pension checks today because they shorted us a little bit or something like that.
No.
But he still plays golf 2, 3, 4 times a week. And when I see him, it looks like he could walk on the field and referee right now.
Yeah.
And I know he's at least, I'll say I'm 74. So he's probably 10, 15 years older than I am.
Just don't mention Kenny's name.
Yeah, no, we got along great. He was awesome. I looked up to him. He would help everybody, not just me. But that's what I respected about him the most. He was very helpful with moving people along to where they can have a better life.
He had great common sense. One of my favorite stories is about that. I had a number of referees I worked for, and it was always a great experience, but they're all different, okay? And a lot of them, I had crews where they would get together and during that 3 or 4 hours start complaining about the grades from last week and this wasn't right or whatever, so forth, or then they would get in discussions and rules, whatever, so forth. And what Rich would do, he had like a 2.5 hour maximum, and he would cut it off. And his theory was, I need you for 3 hours tomorrow. I don't need you for 3 hours today. Go upstairs, get your rest, get your dinner, get a good night's sleep. I always agreed with that, but not all the referees I was with thought that was the right way to go.
Joe, so tell me, the representation of the referees in St. Louis, how do they influence some of the game and some of the other things that go on?
Well, I don't know anything about that.
Okay.
I'm talking about the NFL. Although I should, because there are major rule people who are retired around here who have some input, I guess, with the Missouri State High School Association. But in the National Football League, every March the NFL brings coaches and people in to talk about the rule changes for the year, in and out or whatever, so forth. And it's pretty comprehensive, including replay and things like that. But they also have 2 or 3 NFL officials to come in, and the owners are there, NFL coaches are there. It's really a big representation across the board of people in the National Football League. But they have the officials also come in along with the official supervisors. And one of the things we'll talk about, or they ask us about, is this going to be easy to enforce or to see or whatever, or get input on do you think we need to change that? Or if we do this, because a lot of times, the rule book in the NFL is very comprehensive and it's very, thick. And you could change a rule and say, okay, that's good for football, but you just changed 2 or 3 other things that may not be good unless you go through and you coordinate them on whatever. I saw that happen a couple of times, and I remind them, if you make that change, then you've just changed the ability of a player to do this over there. Do you want to also give him the ability to do that? And they would say, no, that's not what we want to do. Well, that's what you got to discuss in terms of what it means to change a rule or change a mechanic or things like that in the NFL. And we did. I mean, I sat next to not Jerry Jones, his son, 2 or 3 times. This was back when, what's his name from Oakland was there, the former Oakland coach who was in the booth forever.
Gruden, John Gruden.
No, not John.
John
Gruden.
Madden.
Matt, who was one of the most enjoyable people I've ever spent with, and he was just a wealth of knowledge. But he was one of those kind of guys that would, okay, if we did this, we talked about this in 1973, and this is what happened. And you're going, you remember back to 1973, but a lot of times you got to have somebody come up. This is why the rule was changed then. This is what we were worried about, and then you're getting a better idea of whether whether we could take a narrow focus here, or do we have to take a bigger look at it?
Less unintended consequences.
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah.
I think everybody liked John Madden too.
Oh my God,
he was awesome.
He was hilarious. Yeah. He insisted on eating every day at lunch. They picked up the tab. We go to Indiana. And he insisted on eating every day on over the 3 or 4 days with the officials that were there.
That's cool.
It wasn't the coaches. Well, he just said, "Here, I want to go sit with you guys." He was really great to be around.
Speaking of relationships, do you keep in touch with very many players? I mean, what is that like
it's a
on the
fraternity.
field? Okay.
I'm sorry, it's a fraternity.
Yeah.
Yes. I'll tie this into something we were talking about. The 2 best things about my NFL experience. One was the 3 hours on Sunday.
Uh-huh.
You can't explain that, and you can't help but miss it. And the other one was the camaraderie with the officials. There's a lot of, the traveling, the holidays, the yelling, the calls, and whatever. Rich Hantak always laughs. We talk about this. We'll be playing golf, and somebody will yell in our right behind us and whatever. And somebody will take that shot over, and we're going, why? I said, well, didn't you hear what he said? And we're like, we've had 60,000 people behind us screaming at us the whole time. Do you think that distracts us, whatever? So, now I'll use that excuse when I think I need it, but
sure.
But otherwise, I never notice. You just block everything out going on in the stands.
But what about the language, too, out there on the field? I've heard some things from my husband, some of the words that are exchanged that I'm like, you all say that on oh, wow.
You hear players, coaches, officials. Obviously, we're under a little tighter rein in that, and the fans have no qualms about using it. So there's a guy in Arizona, and he just waits for me down at one end, and he knows I'm coming, and he'll as soon as I get down there, I don't even have to turn around. 73, you're the worst effing official I've ever seen. And then later on, now that they got the networks, they can get your name, then they would tell me, not only are you the worst official, you're the worst lawyer we've ever seen, and so forth. Or number 73, I told my son, he's got 73, I said, be ready for him when you get to Phoenix, because he'll be back looking for you when he finds out you're a Larrew. But, there were a lot of experiences like that. And now the fans are great. I love Kansas City. I always thought that was the greatest place to work. But having said that, that was really fun and good in one way. Green Bay is like going to church.
I love Green.
Well, Green Bay is like going to church. The whole stadium, the locker rooms. They have their own Hall of Fame area in the stadium. The fans own the team, whatever. And you get out there, and they know the game and whatever. And the field's beautiful. That's different from almost any type of athletic event you can pick going to Green Bay. And my first Sunday night game was there. Late in December, so December, Green Bay, my first game out there, and it was cold. It was really, really cold. So I got used to that real early, but you know what? You don't ever get used to it. You just get me through this, Lord, and I'll be happy.
Exactly. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the conditions that you've been in. We're going to take a little break, talk to our sponsor, and we'll be back with more conversation with Joe Larrew.
Hello, we're People's National Bank. For more than 100 years, we've been helping families, businesses, and communities achieve their financial goals through personalized service and hometown banking values. Today, we serve over 20 locations in the Midwest. Our president is a proud veteran, and we're especially proud to support those who have served through our new Veteran Rewards program, created to thank veterans and active duty military members for their service. People's National Bank, local, trusted, committed to our community.
Hey, welcome back to StL in the Huddle. Joe, one of the things as a coach you know, when you've got that cold, snowy day, I knew I could put 2-3 jackets on. And I always felt for you guys wearing just, you know, the stripes. I mean, what was that like? And what were the worst conditions you've ever refereed in?
Well, without a doubt, it was Cleveland, 2004. And they had just fired their head coach. I mean, he was the guy that won the national championship out of Florida or something like that. They just fired him. And they were playing, they were playing Oakland. And Oakland had a good team. They were going to the playoffs. But it was in Cleveland. The wind chill was about minus 30 at the kickoff. Freezing rain, blowing, you know, everywhere. I mean, you can only imagine how much stuff you can put on and get away with. I'm like that little kid out in A Christmas Story. I mean, you're just trying to get so you can still move, but whatever. And we did not have great equipment provided to us to deal with those conditions. So you improvise and put everything on you can. But I mean, I laugh because you know, the first half I'm on Cleveland side, Brian. That coach has been fired. Okay, they don't care. You know, they're just going through the motions in their last week. And if they're not going through the motions, it's hard to keep your, you know, because they just didn't care. But what was funny about it was freezing rain, and it was coming straight into my face. You know, and I've got a mask on. This is all I got. It's exposed, but it's coming right in my face. And I'm trying to see with that, okay? And to the extent you can be happy with a 12, 13-minute halftime, which doesn't give you a chance even to go to the bathroom trying to get everything off to go do that, okay? But that's all you got. So we come back out the second half. I go, well, at least I won't have that stuff on my face. No, the wind changed, and now I got the same thing, and you know, it was just the most miserable day. But I've had games like that where because of how wet it was, whatever, we just throw our shoes in trash, and you know, we'll never wear them again. I'll tell you one other story. This is about that game. Okay, we got snow during the game, and you know, we got no sidelines, we got no yard lines, whatever. You just make do, and they'd have people come out there and you know, brush them off every chance you got. And I remember because they gave a downgrade to a guy that was on the other side of my line, but he worked the same thing I did. And you and I have talked about illegal contact, and that's where the defender contacts the receiver more than 5 yards downfield while the quarterback's in the pocket with the ball. And he throws a flag, and it's borderline in terms of how far down the field that it is, but he throws it. And after the game, they graded. They gave him a downgrade because they said he was only 5 yards downfield. And our reaction was, well, how do you know? We couldn't see, there was no yard lines. I mean, we're just guessing where this distance is. But that's what I'm trying to explain about the interesting part of being graded by guys who don't do it or weren't there and so forth. But so anyway, that was the coldest, most miserable game I ever worked. I think it hit minus 30 or whatever at that, you know, during that game.
And I've been to a Cleveland game on a nice day, and that wind comes off the lake, and it just cuts right through.
Well,
I can imagine.
A lot of people will ask you what's the coldest place, and I tell them any station, any stadium near water. Chicago, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Buffalo's unbelievable, Pittsburgh. Anything that's right next to water, when it gets cold, you feel it more, in my opinion.
Except for the hula bowl, of course.
Yeah, no. Waikiki's is fine. No.
And Joe, you were talking about fans and how some of them, well, they think they know better than you do. Whenever you're out in public, do you get recognized? And are they like groupies? Do they attach onto you and try to tell you a thing
I would say like that, though. There are people, and still that happens, like, you know, everybody thinks I'm watching every game on the weekend, so forth. They'll ask me about these calls, whatever. And I may have seen it. When I think I could talk about it, not burn the official, I might talk about it. But when I think otherwise, I just keep my mouth shut. But no, there's a lot. You know, there's interesting conversations. I mean, I live in Bridgeton. I hang out at the sports cafe there. That's been my place to eat, drink, or whatever. And you know, a lot of times, I remember I had a game on it was a playoff game, and it must have been a Friday night. Oh, it was a Saturday night, whatever, out of town. And I flew back, and I went up to Sports Cafe on Sunday afternoon. And you're going to remember this. Dallas was playing. It was like the real controversial play. Dallas was playing whoever they were playing, with the throw toward the end zone in the corner. And I can't remember the receiver's name, but he touches the ball, he gets it, then he goes to the ground, the ball's out, and they went incomplete.
Yes.
They went complete, and they changed it to incomplete.
Yes.
This is not a story about me, but it's a story about what it's like to do that. Because we spent the whole year retraining on what's a catch and what's not a catch, going to the ground, all that. And I remember I'm sitting there next to some guys, and we got the screen right there, and they're Dallas fans, and plays over, and the guy goes up, and I just said, it's incomplete. They're going, what? It's going to be incomplete. They're going, what are you talking about? The guy gave a touchdown. I said, it's a scoring play. They're going to review it, and they're going to change it incomplete. Well, how do you know? I said, well, I know. And then they come back and they make the announcement, it's an incomplete pass. Right. And it's always been a controversial, but I knew what they were going to do because of how they had addressed that all during the season. And if you went to the ground and you didn't keep control of the ball or perform a football act, they were going to say you didn't complete the catch and so forth. And I could watch a lot of games and the most obvious call, and I look at it and I know they're going to change it just because of their philosophies and their interpretations as opposed to the average fans,
That play you're talking about really changed the course of what's a catch and what's not in the NFL. It was a very
but I'll tell you want to know where it all started? This is interesting. There were two calls, and they both involved St. Louis. One was the Mel Gray play on the end zone against Washington, I think it was, or Dallas, and and that would never be a catch nowadays. Never be a catch. And then the other one was the Tampa Bay game with the Rams at home in the playoffs with who was they caught the ball?
It was one of the Buccaneers, and I can't remember his name. Caught the ball and the
ball touched the ground, it moved and whatever.
I was there. It took probably 15 minutes.
I was too. I didn't referee the game. I was operating the clock on the game.
Oh.
But those two plays come in.
Yes.
But after that, it was like almost every year we come back to the clinic in July down in Dallas, and they'd already sent us training materials and stuff like this, and basically telling you, okay, we're going to change this year, we're going to change that. And you're thinking to yourself, well, this will be the third change in the same place in 2 years. You just get very frustrated. And I'll tell you one thing, that when I was in Europe and when I came in the league, the rule of thumb is when in doubt, go incomplete. When in doubt, go incomplete. And they didn't have the replay system like they do now. And people talk about, well, did you ever get a replay change where they ruled against you? I said, yeah. I said, but that doesn't bother me. As long as I was where I was supposed to be, looking at what I was supposed to look at. And you all might recall, they gave me about 0.3 of a second to see it one time. I didn't get to run it frame by frame, slow motion, freeze frame, whatever. I had to make the call. And one of my criticisms right now, to some extent, of some of the officials, I think too often or not, they're not making the call. They're letting TV, you'll see them standing on the sideline, and you're going, what's the ruling on the field? I mean, everything starts with the ruling on the field, whether you can change it anyway. And that's one of the things I saw changing over the years, which I totally disagree with. And, when I talk to young officials, when I go in for these, I say, look, you're out there. Just make the call so the fans know, TV knows, whatever. And if they change it, and again, obviously, high school guys, you don't have, instant replay where they're up there changing it in the booth, but make a call. I have more respect for you if you just make the call. And then, a week later, when they go back and run it back, they can say, oh, wait, look at what happened here. And, well, did he have a look at that? No, he didn't. So, he made a ruling on what he could see.
So when replay came in, did you pretty much have to block that out of your mind and know that
it was an evolution? Just replay coming in where you had a guy up in the booth, as opposed to what we have now. You got a guy up in the booth, you got an assistant, you got they're hooked up with New York to the boss there, and now each one of us is hooked up to each other and to replay. And it used to be, sometimes you're on a field and this. I mean, you want to be able to talk among the officials without anybody knowing what you're saying. Hey, whatever. And especially if you run over to a guy, and I've had that happen where I've run over to a guy or he's run over to me and said, Joe, I don't think that was a block in the bag. I had a good look at that. And, if you trust each other and, whatever, and more often than not, that guy, because you don't come in unless you know.
Right.
But if you come in and you say that, then one guy is, showing the courage to come in and help, and the other guy's got to show the courage to say, okay, that's what you got, that's what we're going to do. But you can't have that conversation anymore, okay? Not really, in the sense that NFL now sitting up there listening to everything you're talking about, and they're going to tell you as opposed to what you can do. And but so it has its positives, but I also think I have nothing wrong with it. I think it's great for the game. They're going to get more calls than what they do. I just don't necessarily. I think to the extent that people say it reflects on the officials and how good they are, I think it does. Because very, very seldom do you get reversed. And if it's so, it's a call. There's no way, or look, there's no way the referee had that call, or it's a judgment or whatever.
But you love what you do, right?
You better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
there's good days, there's bad days, and you're on the field. Sometimes, I always, when I used to preach to the young kids or officials, I say, look, and this is really important to me. The most important call you're ever going to make in your life is the next play. And I say that because if you've screwed up already and done something, you can't change it. And if you start thinking about it and you can't get your mind off of it, you're going to screw up the next play, okay? Now, one of my favorites, complaints and whatever, and some of my favorite people in the world will tell me on this because they watch basketball or whatever, it's when they say, well, that's a makeup call. A makeup call. Now, I've looked at games and maybe soccer or basketball, and I'm going, well, that didn't look real good. We don't get makeup calls because you're graded on each play, and they're going to get you. And if they think you changed a call after that because you missed a call and you want to give a team a call, you'll be out of that league so fast you won't even know it. I mean, they'll figure out who you are and you don't have the guts to make mistakes. But football is different. And again, I'm not saying. I think basketball officials are unbelievable. Soccer officials, we've watched the Cup, and I think, given the circumstances, are unbelievable. Hockey, I've got a good friend of mine who was the charge of NHL security, and he brings up the officials, and a lot of times he's had me come down. I'll go back in the locker room for the game, and we trade our uniforms. I wear 73, they have 73. I take all that stuff home. And I'm always amazed at the soccer officials. I mean, the puck flying by their head, they got to skate forward, backwards.
Oh, it's
They don't
crazy.
get any time off the ice. It's like you were talking about during that cold game. I don't get to go off the ice. I've had players think it's funny to tell me to get away from their water or their heater, when we've got a timeout, and you just want to go over and see if your hands are still, in gloves and whatever.
Well, let me ask you this, all right? Because as a coach, when I would see certain officials, I had a connection with them. There were certain officials, like I saw them, I saw you one night in Kirkwood, and I said, all right, we're going to have a good game. Guys that guys that are reputable will do a good job. Then you had other guys that maybe you just didn't see eye to eye. In the NFL, who was that one coach that you go, I can't wait to do his game? And who was the other coach you go,
I am a great admirer for many reasons of Andy Reid. He is one of the kindest, considerate coaches I've ever met in my life. And I started working him in 2002 when I came in the league, when he was in Philadelphia, and they win the league championship 5 games. They went to the Super Bowl once, but he was always just a classy guy on the side. I would have his sidelines. We're always going to have bang plays and plays that could go either way or whatever. And Andy would come down the field and he always walked, and he had, he looks like a walking bear and whatever. And I was going to say walrus, but that I don't think that's fair.
Bear sounds better.
But he was, Joe, what did you see on that play? I would say, hey, and I remember once there was a tight throw down there, and I mean the defender, and you know what I'm talking about, is not playing the ball. But when they do that, they're going into that receiver and they're trying to time it with the arrival of the ball. Okay. And you can tell that when the guy doesn't look back, and that when the guy doesn't look back, he's already in trouble and suspect if he does anything with that receiver before the ball gets there, okay? And I had one of those, and they were just running down the sideline and the same thing. And I mean, it is so close, I couldn't believe it. But I thought the guy got his hand up and got the ball before he got into the receiver. So I wiped it out. Of course, it's against Philadelphia. And Andy doesn't run down the field, but he comes down the field, Joe. And I said, Coach, it was really close, but I got the ball getting there at the same time the contact occurred. And he goes, okay, thank you. I mean, basically, that's actually, he may have gone back up the sideline and told those guys that's the worst effing official I've ever seen. But my point is he did, and he was always a gentleman, always respectful. And I worked so many of his training camps and training, preseason games. And my favorite thing about him is he loves food. And he was always trying to set you up with one of his favorite restaurants. And he'd make sure they took care of the meal for you. Or at training camp, he goes, "Where you guys want to get barbecue tonight?" And he'd give us a barbecue place. And he'd line us up, whatever. And just a classy guy, but also a very, very great coach. Very great. And his success is deserved. And I just admire him very much. A guy that a lot of the coaches, a lot of the guys, really don't care much for, and I understand why, and that's Belichick. And I had because we were on an East Coast crew when I started. I didn't have a problem with Belichick. In fact, Belichick was the only coach that ever told me that he was wrong, I was right on a call that I had in front of him. But he's just the most unfriendly guy you've ever met. Okay, he wouldn't let us in our locker room when we're supposed to go in there 2.5 hours before the game to meet with him in the locker room. He wouldn't even let us inside the locker room. Okay, so we had to stand outside and with all the people that were out there and so forth to give them the information, to get the information. Good. But, I to this day, I still remember, what was going on, and I'm not going to comment on it directly, but the St. Louis New England game where they lost in the Super Bowl. I mean, there were some tough calls in that game, but I'll leave it at that. But the one thing that jumped out at me about Belichick, if you don't call it, he's going to keep doing it.
Right.
Okay? In other words, if they can hold whatever, if they know they can get away with pushing the line of scrimmage, whatever, once they figure out, you're going to. And so I kind of picked up on that. And I had Belichick a bunch. And what I knew is that the first time I had a grab out there on a receiver and whatever, and hold whatever, I fired right away. Because if you did that, he called him back. He said, "Okay, we're not going to be able to do it over here," and so forth. But I remember, to me, this is one of my favorite situations, because when you tell somebody that Belichick actually told you were right, he was wrong. I had a play on his sideline where the receiver looks like he goes out in and sets a pick, and it's like this right there on the defender, whatever. The ball comes over, completes, whatever, and Belichick screaming it's a pick, offensive pass interference, whatever. And I knew what he was doing and I go, "Bill, it was not a pick. He missed him. There's no contact." And now he's got the hat off and walking around talking about you and so forth. But then he comes back 3 plays later. "Hey, look, I talked to the guys upstairs. They said there was no contact." He said, "So you got it right." Now, that's about as friendly as he got, and so forth. But
I played for his dad, actually.
Really?
He coached me at Navy.
Oh.
And he was the same type of coach. He was very type personality. Is pretty funny when he got on the field, and he'd tell you.
He's not friendly. He's not warm. warm. But how could you say there's a better coach? With all the Super Bowls and whatever, he's got some other things he has to live with too. But success is one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you change if you were to change a rule now to make it better?
Where do I start? And the reason why, the one that jumps out at me when I came into the league, and you'll know this, that in high school, for example, offensive pass interference cannot occur unless the contact occurs beyond the line of scrimmage. Okay? In the NFL, we don't have that rule. And I remember the Bears were the worst team. They would block, set up picks on defenders behind the line of scrimmage, and that's as much OPI.
Oh yeah.
I want to make sure I say this right. Oh, I'm sorry. It had to do with whether the ball crossed the line of scrimmage. Okay, and they were setting it up, where the ball would or wouldn't, whatever I'm saying, but that would never have been a foul anywhere else. And I thought that was a great disadvantage to the defense in those situations. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I should say that better, but I thought pass interference should always apply downfield. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I can't tell you how many times, I screwed that thing up. But it's been 5 years since I thought about it. 20 years when I first wanted to change that rule. So I made that mistake. But who knows what pass interference is there? I have a pretty good idea, but literally, they every year we come in for a clinic, and I can't tell you how many times. Okay, this year this is a hold, this is not a hold, and then the next year they change it back to what it was. And there was a lot of inconsistencies. You talk about like the celebrations, first you couldn't do it, then you could do it, then you could do this, but you can't do that. And to me, I don't know why they don't just take that off the field and put it in New York. Now let you tell us everything you want. But 'cause, a lot of times celebration is just an honest expression of excited players, whatever. And they're not always meant to be unsportsmanlike. That's my point. Now to me, I'd be much tougher on any player who gets in the face of another guy, and I know that he's trying to start something. I shut that down real quick. I don't think that has any part of the game. And one of the biggest problems that the NFL has is that everything that they let them do up there, they let them, the college guys try to do and the high school guys try to do, and they're not going to let that in the game, and I think we should be setting the example. We're not going to let it in the game too.
Joe, if you had somebody who's, they're listening to this podcast and they're interested in getting in that profession, what would you tell them?
I would encourage them. We have associations in the area for high school football officials, basketball officials. I would imagine soccer, the baseball umpires they have there. And the best place is just to, you get a hold of them. And when you do, they'll give you the opportunity to get training, teaching, to get games to work. But the one thing that I'm really big on, these officials now, in my opinion, are being too fast-tracked. Okay, I mean, I was 20 years as an official before I got in the league, and then I worked 20 more. But, we've got the guys, and that you've got second and third year high school officials working games, and not to take anything away from them, but they don't have the experience. They don't have the training, and they shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. But they'll be the first one. Hey, I had a varsity game this weekend, and I'll look at them going, you had a varsity game? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but, you need to understand that this isn't one of those things where you can watch it on TV and then say, okay, I'm going to go referee next week. Right. And I think a lot of people have the idea that their second and third year, they don't know why they're not working in the NFL. Seriously. And
it takes time.
A long time.
It really does. And I think back to my early days, my younger days when I was starting off as a coach, and I was at the freshman level. And we would get all the new officials. And I had one guy one day, and he made a call that I didn't agree with. And I said, look, you keep making calls like that, neither one of us is going up to varsity, all right?
Yeah.
But that was the way it was. You had to work your way up. And now, you're right, they have to fast track.
And again, a lot of that, it's not necessarily their fault. It's because they don't have enough officials to cover the games.
Exactly.
And the money's not bad now and so forth. But I can't, I've got grandsons who are playing, in these, like Ledoux's got in the league. Like Ledoux, they all got these games like for 8th, 9th, 10th graders. And it's so far beyond what we had back in the days when I was at Normandy. But I mean, they have like, a training ground, whatever, so forth, which I think is great. But, you got officials who are working there on Friday afternoon or Saturday morning or whatever. And, frankly, I think they could use a lot of help. By that, both in terms of honest criticism and honest suggestions and things like that. I learned a long time ago when my kids were playing high school football. They were all at Pattville. I got as far away from the crowd as I could get, just so I could watch it quietly and privately.
Yeah.
And then also so I wouldn't be tempted to say something to an official that I didn't like or agree with,
We had, at the St. Louis chapter, we have an award that's a Hantak Larrew Award. Just, and Sherry's husband actually received that.
Yes.
And he's going to want to listen to this right away because he really thinks the world of you. I know that.
I remember meeting him now. Okay, there's so much. At my age, I'm 74 now, so I forget everything, especially names. But I remember meeting him, and they were very impressive.
They're a good crew.
Awesome.
Real good crew.
And that's the thing. I mean, if you get lucky enough to get on a crew like at St. Louis, and if I start saying names, I'm going to miss somebody, but you know who they are. Right. Kenny Priest, Mike Priest, crews like that, and then there's a lot more. And you want them on the Kirkwood Webster game or the CBC DeSmet game, CBC St. Louis Shoe High game. But, on the other hand, when you've got, what would you say? Is there like 80, 90 games every weekend now between St. Louis, Illinois, Al State, whatever, and so forth. And
At least that much.
I was looking at the schedule. I couldn't believe.
and you got to have 5 or 6 officials now in the game. I mean, it's just a really tough situation, and I would really encourage. I mean, that's a big deal to me. Trying to encourage, especially if you're in high school, you played it, you enjoyed the game, or even like I did the one night at the banquet on the award we gave, is that, hey, a commercial moment for me. You know, if you enjoyed your experience and you've been honored to do this, you know, you don't have to be done with this after right now or college. And if you'd like to keep the game going or give back, please, you know, look into becoming an official, and you'll be grateful. And I never, you know, people say, how do you get to the NFL? I'm going, I don't know how I got to the NFL. I just, you know, I outlasted, I think, everybody. You know, seriously. I just kept doing it. Although I tell you one of the funny parts about it, and I didn't mean to go off on this direction, you know, I spent 20 years, and I'm gone 19 out of 21 weekends. That's why when you talk about who pays the price. Now, my wife loved that, okay? and I tell the story because when the season was over, and, you know, hopefully you had a playoff game, and now your season over, and she goes, do you have another game? I go, no. And she just shake her head like this, and
You're home.
she knew I was going to be home.
And more laundry, more dishes.
Oh,
more
whatever. I made sure I stayed out of her way, but I mean, she was not exactly, you know,
Good strategy.
joyous that I was going to be home now for 5 or 6 weeks or something like that. I don't mean that the wrong way, but she gets so used to having the house by herself that, you know, I upset that.
We're going to let you explain that to her.
Yeah, well, she's heard it before.
Well, Joe, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I mean, it's really an honor to have you here. As Kenny said, the Hand-Tack Larrew. Do we call it the Larrew Hand-Tack Award instead?
I don't think Rich would appreciate it. I owe him a phone call tomorrow anyway. I'm going to tell him that you suggested that we switch that number out. No. But Rich is a great guy, and you know, again, I don't even know why Larry Frost put me in with Hand-Tack, and I think Hand-Tack's the greatest official we've ever had come out. Now when I say that like Ed Shannon, I mean, there's so many guys out there that were great. But Rich was as good as there was. And you know what? And one thing I want to do, because thank you to your association, not for putting our names on a trophy. And I don't know whether people realize this trophy, this award is given for outstanding crews, not outstanding individual on a crew or the greatest official. This is about a team of officials that work together a whole season, give it all, and have a great season. And you recognize the fact that they're a crew as opposed to 7 guys, 6 guys, or whatever. That was Hand-Tack's thing, you know. And frankly, I learned that from him. And to the extent I spent all those years working with young guys over the latter part of my thing, I preached that too. Look, we're all together. We got to be together. We got to stay together. We got to support each other. We got to help each other. You know, get ready. If you work, I mean, I'm working hard. You better be working hard to get ready for this game too. We're all going out there. And we owe it to the players, we owe it to the fans, we owe it to the game, and we really owe it to each other. And that's a big deal with me.
Please tell Mr. Hand-Tack I said hello.
I will. I'll be happy to do that. I promise you. He wants me to call him tomorrow to explain why they cut our checks shorter after we got a pay increase on our pension.
Right.
Thanks
Joe,
again.
thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great to have
our
you.
pleasure.
This has been StL in the Huddle, the official podcast for St. Louis Football Foundation, College Football Hall of Fame, Tom Lombardo chapter. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
Thanks again for listening to StL in the Huddle. And thanks to our sponsor, People's National Bank. Customers, people, community. Member FDIC. Please like, subscribe, and share our podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep cheering, keep dreaming, and we'll catch you on the sidelines soon.